Hello and welcome to Goose Egg Kitchen. I have spent half of my life here and the other half there. 2 homes and a whole world of flavors that I want to share with you. And don't forget that you can also watch this recipe in Italian on my other channel. Today, we're bringing my childhood back to life with this olive and onion stuffed focaccia. I used to buy a piece all the time on my way back home from school, back when I was in Italy. Let me show you just how easy it is to make. For the dough, you will need 3 cups, or about 360 grams of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon, or about 5 grams of granulated sugar, 1 cup, or 236 milliliters of water, 3 tablespoons of 45 milliliters of olive oil, plus 3 more for the filling. 1 packet or 2 1/4 teaspoon or 21 grams of active dry yeast. 1 teaspoon or about 6 grams of salt. 3 large onions. 1 bay leaf. 3 cups or 700 grams of cured olives. Not this, or this, or this, or this, and certainly not this. You will recognize them because they look a little wrinkled and they're oily on the outside, but they are not packed in any kind of liquid or oil. These days, you can easily find them in small jars at any grocery store, but you can find much bigger jars for cheaper at ethnic supermarkets. That's where I got mine. Let's start by waking up the yeast. Add your sugar to the water, then the yeast. I use lukewarm water, but room temperature will do just fine. Just try to avoid cold water. Stir to combine and set it aside. The only downside to using dry cured olives is that they're not pitted. So let's take them out the old-fashioned way. And here's a little gadget I got for such an occasion. This process is a little time-consuming, but 100% worth the effort. You just put the olive in there, push with the metal piece, and the pit should come right out. Now repeat it 975 more times. And before I knew it, I was on my last olive, absolutely not on the verge of a nervous breakdown. And done. Now, on to the second most important part of this recipe, the dough for the focaccia. As usual, the dry ingredients go in first, starting with the flour. If you're measuring by volume, do not pack it tight. I chose to add 2 teaspoons of vital wheat gluten, but it's not necessary. It just makes the dough a little more elastic and strong. You know the trick. Why sift when you can whisk? Remember the yeast we fed a little while ago? It looks healthy and active, so we can go add it straight into the flour. After adding the wet ingredients to any dough, I always like to start with a spoon and then go in with my hands. That just helps make a little bit less of a mess. Time for the salt. We did not add it at the beginning with the rest of the dry ingredients because we want to avoid direct contact with the yeast. All we need to do now is knead for several minutes. Look at this cool gadget I found on Amazon to stabilize the bowl. And onto our last addition, the olive oil. Let's keep going until we have a beautiful, smooth, elastic dough ball. If you have a clean bowl, it means you did it right. Look how perfect that is. Let's cover and give it a few minutes to rest. You can leave it right on the counter. We're going to knead it just a couple of times. You won't believe how smooth and wonderful this dough is. And you know me, I like to score an X in the middle to facilitate rising. Set it and forget it until doubled in size. Let's make the filling. We're going to peel and cut the onions. I'm doing it by hand, but you can use a mandolin or a food processor. They don't need to be paper thin, but you also don't want them in big chunks. Something like this. It really looks like a lot of onions, but they will cook down. Let's move them to the stove where we have a skillet with 3 tablespoons of olive oil waiting. You can put them in right away or you can preheat your pan to medium. The bay leaf goes in now, by the way. You will not need to turn the heat higher than medium at any point in this cooking process. What we're looking for is to let the onion slowly break down and get tender and develop a nice, delicate flavor. We're gonna give the onions a 10 to 15 minute head start, and then we dump the olives right in. If you want, you can chop them up in a food processor, or you can leave them whole like I did. Let it simmer covered for 30 minutes or until the onions are done. You will know that the filling is ready when the onions are tender, flavorful, and they will have borrowed a little color from the olives. By now, your dough should have risen beautifully. But how long is that going to take? I don't know. It depends on where you keep your thermostat. If your living room is hot enough that you can fry an egg on your coffee table, yours is probably going to rise faster than mine. But in most cases, it shouldn't take more than 30 to 45 minutes. Split the dough in two, but make sure that one of the two halves is a little bigger than the other. You will need a little more dough for the bottom part. Pull out your rolling pin and roll out the bigger half as close to a rectangle as you can. How big you make it depends on how thick you want it. I don't like it very thick, so I think I used the 9 by 13 for mine. Pour in all of the filling and then smooth it out with a fork or a spoon or any utensil. Make sure you take out the bay leaf. Set it aside and let's work on the top piece. You're going to do the same thing you did for the bottom. This dough is so awesome that I didn't even need to flour my counter. But you can use your own recipe, or if you want to make this a super quick meal, you can buy dough from the grocery store. Lay it right on top of the filling, and then try to trim off the excess dough from the bottom piece so that you have just enough left over to crimp the edges a little bit to make sure that it's visually appealing and that none of the filling escapes during cooking. Do that all the way around and then seal the deal with a fork. In the meantime, preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Drizzle a little more olive oil for good measure and dock the top of the dough. That just means that we're going to poke a bunch of holes, mostly to prevent air bubbles from forming during cooking. Look at this beauty! I cannot wait for it to be ready. A cool trick that I use is that I put the focaccia right on top of the oven for a few minutes so that it can puff up and rise just a little bit before I bake it. And yes, I'm still rocking my Christmas oven mitt. 30 minutes at 400 degrees, and then we'll be done. As usual, every oven is different, so make sure that you keep an eye on it. Just look at this. It is magnificent. If you love olives as much as I do, this is a dream come true. And now, the real and the real. Well, that's all for today. My name is Sylvia. Thanks for stopping by. If you would like to support the channel, you can comment, like, share, subscribe, or follow me on TikTok. Bye!
Buona è venuta.
Assieme faccia per la chiancaretta eppure passa zizze un paese non si mattarantì con cuore rosso blu beviamo birra raffinata